So the NBA season's over with. The NBA draft has went by, and I, the casual, has the privilege of being able to let you guys know about the free agency and what these teams could be able to do to make the team either better or just make them relevant. To make these videos easier on the eyes, because I know some of these videos can get long-winded, we're going to go ahead and split these teams down to each conference. So we're going to have 2 videos per conference, and we're going to start with the Eastern Conference. Remember to like the video. We're going to speed past the first 3 teams. That is obviously the worst teams of the Eastern Conference. By the way, we're going to be going in order from worst team to best team. So that means we're going to start with the 3 worst teams, and not just the Eastern Conference, but the entire NBA. I'm talking about none other than Detroit Pistons, the Charlotte Hornets, and the Washington Wizards. To start with the Detroit Pistons, I don't know what to tell you guys. Cade Cunningham with another season where he gets it going towards the second end of the season, but the first half of the season, it was just full of inconsistencies. Jaden Ivey was playing from the starting lineup to the backup, back to the starting lineup. Jalen Duren was having injuries, and then when he came back in, it was sort of hard for him to catch his footing because Monty Williams was throwing out terrible lineups that quite literally made no sense because there was no floor spacing, and you know that you don't have floor spacing, it's not going to maximize the players, your key players. And that's the main reason that I don't really have a problem with the Detroit Pistons firing Monty Williams, because Monty Williams honestly was just throwing stuff out there. He has lineups where he's throwing Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Asur Thompson, along with Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren, and albeit giving full credit to Isaiah Stewart being a floor spacer, him alone is not enough floor spacing for Cade Cunningham to be maximized, Jaden Ivey to be maximized, and especially not Jalen Duren, who's sitting in the paint most of the time, to be maximized. Going into this offseason, the priority needs to be floor spacing and an extra rim protector. As an accessory, if they can, looking into a player like a Tobias Harris is coming off of a contract and coming fresh out of a situation where I think he even knows that he was underutilized and undervalued. But given the fact that he's a complete veteran at this time, coming back to Detroit, I think he could be able to show the rope to some of the young guys. And more than anything, I think he could be the extra oomph that helps this offense make sense. Moving to the Washington Wizards. Coming into this season, a lot of people really only cared about the Jordan Poole situation and how he could be able to come in and be able to turn into this all-star caliber player that could give you 20 to 25 points per game any given night on efficient shooting. And they just wanted to see him put on a show. And he put on a show, all right. A clown show. It was crazy. I'm talking about and one move that backfired. I'm talking about him falling on his ass. I'm talking about him thinking he has a clear look at the rim, and then as soon as he tries to shoot the shot, it gets blocked because there was a person there the entire time. He just looked past them. The shit was ugly. But I will tell you guys that when it came to the Washington Wizards, there were some good spots. One of which being none other than Kyle Kuzma, who literally just signed an extension with the Washington Wizards just last summer. Now, I will not be one that will lie and say that his efficiency is justified, even though I do give some type of leeway due to the team not necessarily being that talented. That being said, though, this is a player that he's always been. He's not the most efficient forward in the league, but it was the way and the intent in which he was looking to diversify his scoring ability that sort of made him one of the talents that I think if traded to a team that is competent, he could actually be a valued rotational piece. Coming into this offseason, I think that the Washington Wizards should take a good look at the young talent that they have around themselves, really be honest with themselves on whether these players can be able to stay with them for the long haul. And especially with some of these players that's due for rookie extensions, they need to tell the truth on whether they can even afford to give them that. Washington just most recently traded Denny Avia, and I don't even think that that's a bad trade. I think Denny was not being utilized on the Washington Wizards the way that I think he can. I think that given the circumstances of the situation they're in, I think Washington should just look to continue to stay in the position that they're at and just go into the draft next year with high hopes of getting a high pick. Again, shout out to them drafting Alex Sarr. I think that that's a great starting point, but the job is not done. They still need to work twice as hard and even harder the next year for them to be able to get back in the position of even just being relevant. And that brings me to the good old Charlotte. Look, man, I don't know how many times we have to have this conversation about LaMelo Ball. He is not necessarily the most healthiest guard that you'll find. And even his talent has not been allowed to progress due to him just continuously getting hurt. He still has a tendency to settle for ill-advised jump shots. Even with his playmaking ability being impressive due to his passing ability, it still gets reduced to just simply fast break passes that make highlights for ESPN. I think LaMelo Ball can impact the game on an even bigger level, but for that to happen, he has to be on the court for him to be able to develop, getting the proper reps, and being able to play with his teammates so that he can know what they can and can't do. A clear bright spot for the Charlotte Hornets has to be Brandon Miller, and it should not be a conversation. Coming into the season, a lot of people were ready to put Brandon Miller in the same space as Jabari Smith Jr. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I was one of them. Coming out of Alabama, and especially during the summer league, he did not show anything that led me to believe that he could be anything more than a beneficiary of LaMelo Ball's creation. And to a certain extent, in the beginning of the season, he was still showing those exact tendencies. Add that to the fact that they still had that terrible head coach, Steve Clifford, coaching that unit, which meant that that entire offense was dysfunctional, and you literally had a recipe for disaster. What I was pleased to see, though, is the fact that over time, Brandon Miller got comfortable. He got comfortable dribbling. He got comfortable being able to shoot off of the dribble. He got comfortable being able to play make for others. And he even got comfortable being able to score within transition, even, no matter whether contact was coming or contact was being enforced on his own. Coming into the offseason, I think Charlotte is desperate for another. Hold on. Let me try that again. Coming into free agency, I don't think Charlotte really has any reason to really be in the sweepstakes for anybody coming into free agency. I don't think that they have any needs that the players that are in free agency could be able to give them. I think the trade market could be beneficial. And I'm looking directly at Dorian Finney-Smith. Charlotte fans and I were watching them this entire season, and the only thing that grew more and more apparent was the fact that Miles Bridges just isn't the guy to be able to hang your hat on to be here, whether LaMelo's here or not. Add that to the fact he's looking for an even bigger payday that he's just not worthy of. I'm looking at Mark Williams and how his rim protection just continues to develop whenever he's on the court. He just needs to be on the court. But the main thing that killed the Charlotte Hornets, even when they were in these close games against teams like the Boston Celtics, was the fact that they didn't have enough floor spacing at the forward spot. A lot of those forwards were just versatile on the defensive end, maybe even versatile in the way that they can attack the rim, attack closeouts. But as far as them being able to shoot open shots at an efficient rate, they weren't able to do so. Looking at DFS, I don't really know what Brooklyn has in store for him. He doesn't necessarily fit the timeline that they seem like they're looking towards, especially after trading Mikal Bridges. And I don't really think that DFS wants to be there, especially if they're looking to rebuild all over again. I think if you're Charlotte, I don't really think the NBA draft does anything for you at this point, because you're sort of in that middle point of where you have talent that's properly developing. You just need to actually go ahead and now go push for veterans or talents that's already developed to pair with LaMelo Ball, with Brandon Miller, with Mark Williams, and allow them to figure out how to become a winning unit on their own with the help of a competent head coach, obviously. And I'm gonna make this quick for you guys because the Brooklyn Nets and Toronto Raptors are within the same range of what they need to do. And that's not being buyers, but sellers this free agency. Reports have surfaced from none other than Adrian Wojnarowski that the Mikal Bridges sweepstakes is going to the New York Knicks. Brooklyn Nets are already trading their all-star caliber player. And add that to the fact that the Toronto Raptors have not been quiet either. They reportedly have traded Jalen McDaniels to the Sacramento Kings. And in exchange, they take Davion Mitchell, who's another young and up-and-coming perimeter defender. Some of these teams that I'll be speaking on even later on in the video, they have nothing to be able to gain, but they do have a lot to be able to exploit to the NBA, to NBA teams. And in exchange, they just get draft compensation. And when it comes to the Toronto Raptors and the Brooklyn Nets, they fit the bill perfectly. Moving into the play-in teams, we're going to go with the Atlanta Hawks and the Chicago Bulls. The Atlanta Hawks are actually one of the teams that also fit the bill of the Toronto Raptors and the Brooklyn Nets, as they should be sellers instead of buyers in this free agency. Over the last 3 years or so, the Atlanta Hawks have given up assets after assets just so that they can end up right in the same place. If not, argument can be made in a worse situation. Trading all those assets for a player like Clint Capella, trading all those assets for players like Bogdanovich, trading all those assets for players like DeJounte Murray have got them in a position of where they have a star named Trae Young that is essentially just sitting there waiting for their team to be able to fix all of their mistakes. Now they're trying to fix it as reports come out that DeJounte Murray has been traded to the New Orleans Pelicans. And to be fair, 2 first-round draft picks along with 3 solid players, one of them being a young defensive guard at 6'7" named Dyson Daniels. That's not a bad asset swap for DeJounte Murray's services. The thing is, when it comes to the Atlanta Hawks, they have to work twice as hard just for them to get back where they were just 3 years ago. And that's a situation that you hate to be in. Shout out to them for drafting Zachary Rissecher, but that's not enough to keep Trae Young in a good place. I predict that coming this free agency, the Atlanta Hawks just sell. They sell Sadiq Bey's services. They sell DeAndre Hunter's services potentially. They even sell Clint Capella's services. And they just look to go young. And they may even look to trade Trae Young this free agency. But I don't think they'll achieve it because they'll probably ultimately trade him before the trade deadline. And same thing with the Chicago Bulls. I think that team does not need to be buying anything in free agency. If anything, they need to just accept their losses. A team that was put together a little bit over 2 years ago, and Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Vucevic has panned out to be a total disaster. Year after year, the Chicago Bulls just continue to end up in the play-in or towards the bottom of the playoffs, and they end up going up against teams that they know that they have no business going up against because they're just not as good, and they end up getting knocked out very easily. Kobe White was able to be the biggest bright spot, not just in the Chicago Bulls, but in the entire NBA because of his sudden elevation of production that they needed desperately. That being said, though, the Chicago Bulls are in a situation where they're going to have to decide exactly where they want to go. And with DeMar DeRozan being potentially off of the books, Vucevic probably having some level of trade value, and so does Zach LaVine, I think that they should look to just restart, go young, and get draft assets for these stars that they have. And then we have the Miami Heat and the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, this is where it gets interesting. For the Miami Heat, the main thing that they're missing is just consistent star power. Jimmy Butler is in and out of the lineup. Bam Adebayo just is not the scoring threat that people would like him to be, even though he showed proof that he could be able to elevate his game during the season. It's not enough to justify you being able to look at him as a consistent number one. And that's why I think that they should go into free agency looking to trade off of some of the assets that they still have. Zach LaVine or Donovan Mitchell should be the first names that is being looked at to come to the Miami Heat. What they've been missing consistently is the fact that they don't have a consistent scoring threat. And I mean scoring, like legit scoring. Like they don't need to do anything else outside of score the ball in a myriad of ways. I have the utmost respect for Tyler Hero and his development. I don't think people have noticed exactly how much he's developed, not just as a scorer, but also as a passer and playmaker. But please spare me with his all-star potential. There's a clear ceiling to what Tyler Hero can be. He is not nearly a good enough finisher, or he does not have the mid-range game that would garner him to be a perimeter threat consistently. He does not shoot the basketball at an elite clip to consider him to be that valuable of an asset to where you're asking for hauls or you're calling him an untouchable. Like, these things are ridiculous. And I think after this season, the Miami Heat have to come to the realization that he has to go. Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler are in win now mode. And especially with Pat Riley's last comment, it seems like he's fed up. And although an argument can be made he's fed up with Jimmy Butler's antics, I think he's fed up with just consistently getting to the finals, get knocked out in the first round, or barely making it to the finals. And even when he makes it to the finals, it's an uphill battle because his team is just at that much of a deficit. I would also like to say that going for a player like Jonas Valanciunas would not be the worst idea if we're going into free agency. One of the main things that the Miami Heat have been criticized for is having Bam Adebayo play the center spot. And even though Bam Adebayo has been doing a phenomenal job at the center spot, I think we all can understand that there's a true ceiling to him being the center versus what can be unlocked with him being a roamer at the power forward spot. And I think if you bring in a player like of Jonas Valanciunas caliber that's able to finish as average as a big man in the NBA can, while also being on the floor space to a certain degree, I think that you unlock potential for this Miami Heat's offense. And then for the Philadelphia 76ers, they just need star power. They need star power or depth, and they need a shit ton of it. Paul George's name has been ringing around. I don't really see where Paul George really could benefit going to the Philadelphia 76ers outside of being able to play with a top 5 player, the caliber of Joel Embiid. 3, 2, 1. But as recently of 2021, that was the same selling point for him playing alongside Kawhi for this long. If you ask me, I think that the Philadelphia 76ers should double down on depth. They should get them some wing depth, re-sign Kelly Oubre, re-sign re-sign Nicholas Batum, backup bigs, and just re-sign Kyle Lowry on a vet minimum and just look to try this again. I personally don't think that a Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid-led duo is enough to win a championship, but we're here now. Ben Simmons has not panned out. James Harden didn't pan out. And you sort of just got to swing for the fences at this point. But make this move your best move because this might potentially be your last. Indiana Pacers. Now, me as a Bucks fan, me and Indiana got beat. But taking my bias out of it, the Indiana Pacers have nothing to gain from this free agency. They're pretty much set. They just need to develop what they have. And if anything that they need to get from free agency, I think it's probably being more sellers than buyers and maybe looking to see if you can get some draft compensation off of some of the young wings and guards that you have on the team for you to be able to maybe make a swing for the fences in later free agencies. Pascal Siakam has been a wonderful addition. I did not think it was going to pan out this much. And even an argument can be made during the postseason. I think he was more of the number one than Tyrese Halliburton. I still think that when it comes to Nembhard and Benedict Mathurin, that they have a core that our argument can be made, giving them a few more times and pairing them with some more defensive assets. They can be able to compete with just about anyone. As we saw, they made it to the Eastern Conference Final this season. But everything is contingent on health, progression, and just getting the right pieces around them. But I don't think any of these pieces in free agency right now would be the ones that the Indiana Pacers should be looking to be big buyers on. Now, when it comes to the Orlando Magic, they need floor spacing. The passing and playmaking that they're getting from Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, even Cole Anthony, and especially from Paolo Banchero, is enough for them to be able to be looked at as one of the more respectable playmaking tandems that we have seen in this league. That's a large reason why they were able to be the 5th seed. But ultimately, the problem that they had was the fact that they had a bunch of floor spaces that really weren't floor spaces. They just got enough opportunities to be able to capitalize on during the regular season. But once we got to the postseason, we realized very quickly that they did not have what it took to be looked at as serious floor spacers. Now, some people are saying that they should look for a player the caliber of Klay Thompson, but I'm going to go a different route. I want to say a name that has not been brought up nearly as much, but he's just as much of a sharpshooter as Klay Thompson is at this stage of his career. And I think an argument can be made off ball. He has just as much, if not more, impact than Klay Thompson has currently as well. And I'm talking about Buddy Hield. A large reason why Buddy Hield was not able to be successful in Philadelphia or even in Indiana before that was due to, one, he was dealing with an abdomen injury, but also he was also missing a lot of open shots. And I don't think that that is a true testament to who he is, because I think up to now, he's built up a reputation within his career of being one of the strongest shooters that we have seen in this entire NBA association. And people just look past that just because he was having a tough stretch or he had a tough season. Add that to the point, I also feel like Orlando has more to gain than they have to lose on signing a player like Buddy Hield, because it's not like they're expected to continue to be a top 5 seed going into the future. Philadelphia wasn't healthy, neither was Miami. And I think if both of those teams were healthy, I don't think anybody would say that Orlando has any right to be ahead of them when it comes to the standings. They add Buddy Hield and maybe another floor spacing forward. And I think that they're looking at a much more consistent offense. And along with their top 5 defense that they had this past season, I think that they look like even more of a formidable defensive unit because their offense cannot hinder them nearly as much as it did this past postseason. Getting into the home stretch, let's talk about Cleveland. Now, the problem I have with Cleveland is the fact that they've been teetering for the last 2 years on what they were going to do with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. And after this season, I find it so difficult for you to still believe that holding on to Jared Allen is the best idea. It seems as if the Cleveland Cavaliers are buying in on Donovan Mitchell all the way. And if you're buying in on Donovan Mitchell all the way, you need to buy in on making the right moves that's going to best keep you guys, one, in playoff contention, but also make you guys formidable enough to beat teams like Boston, like Milwaukee, like Philadelphia, like even New York. And that's why I feel like when it comes to them, they probably need to look for a wing that can be able to add some versatility on the scoring front. Yes, I'm looking at Paul George as one of those potential culprits. But more than anything, I think that if they don't do anything, they need to decide what they're going to do between Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. I would potentially move Jared Allen, keep Evan Mobley, move him to the center spot as he's shown that he can be a lone rim protector, a valued rebounder, and even a scoring threat on the interior. I think he's shown that he deserves that much respect. Looking into a player like Tobias Harris, potentially, maybe even, I think that this team could actually look even more formidable than they have before. Oh, my Bucks. Getting into the Bucks, man. The main thing that we're missing is wing athleticism. We don't necessarily need more offensive value, but we need defensive value that could be able to disguise Damian Lillard's flaws, as it got really ugly this past season. The consistent times that Damian Lillard was dying on screens, not having anybody there to necessarily help, and even in Giannis's case, having to do so much work that he just possibly couldn't keep up with everything that was going on the offensive side for the opposing team. I truly don't think that anybody on this roster was dealt a fair hand. My idea for what the Milwaukee Bucks need to do is not necessarily look to be buyers or sellers in the free agency market. They need to decide what they want to do going into the trade market during the regular season, as Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton are winding down their value on this Milwaukee Bucks team. I've been hearing reports about Bobby Portis potentially being on the trade block, and I think that that's one of the worst things that they could possibly do. The versatility that he brings alongside of Giannis Antetokounmpo it's very hard to find. I've been saying this for the last couple of years now, but Giannis' athleticism continues to only dwindle down throughout every injury that he gets. And especially having Brook Lopez still there, you're only hindering the inevitable. That's ultimately moving Giannis Antetokounmpo to the center spot. Trading off of Brook Lopez, moving Bobby Portis to the starting lineup full time would assist in 2 things. One, it would help us be able to actually have a consistent offensive unit that we put out on the court that's not fully beneficial of Damian Lillard and Giannis' creation, as Bobby Portis has shown that he can be able to go out there and create his own shot, especially during this postseason, albeit against a bad defense, the caliber of the Indiana Pacers. He was still showing that he was able to create his own shot when asked to do so, if he just was given it in the spots that he can normally operate in. What it also does is it also helps Giannis be more closer to the basket, lowers the probability of him having to steamroll and put his body through heavy contact on a consistent basis for him to get to the basket. And he can be one of those players that primarily plays out of the post. Just because you have one facet of your game that makes you unique does not mean that that has to be the only thing that defines you. It's called evolution. And furthermore, I want to talk about a team that's definitely evolving, the New York Knicks. The name of the game is versatility. And especially at the wing spot, versatility cannot be any more crucial. And looking at the New York Knicks and the move that they made already, and they can still continue to make with the assets that they currently have, they are in a wonderful position. Jalen Brunson showed last postseason, playing like 2024 version of AI, that he can be able to be the offensive focal point as far as a scorer, and even as a passing playmaker in some of those series, he excelled in. And what they also found out was having a player the caliber of Josh Hart, of OG Anunoby, being there to put their being able to put their versatility on full effect. The New York Knicks didn't look like they were going to be able to beat the Boston Celtics, but they sure looked like the team that could be able to give them the most headache. And so when I see on the reports that they've traded for Mikal Bridges and they're looking to re-sign OG Anunoby, I grow even more excited for this core. Shout out to the Villanova boys, Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Dante DiVincenzo, and Josh Hart, as they look to be the saviors that the Eastern Conference is looking for to put an end to the bad boy Boston Celtics. Going into free agency, I honestly don't think that they need to make any hectic moves. If anything, I think that they should stand back on what they're doing right now. I think that they should look to trade Julius Randle, trade Mitchell Robinson, and look to bring in assets for them to be able to bring in either a big time player or at the very least look to trade during the regular season for some rotational pieces that could be able to help buffer their front line. And then we got the Boston Celtics. Look, man, the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford. What else do they need? To be quite honest with you, I don't think that they have anything that they need to look for in this free agency. They have some of the best at their respective position on their own team currently under contract. If anything, the only thing they need to worry about is extending Derek White so that they don't lose out on one of the best POA defenders in the entire league. But hey, man, that's going to wrap it up for the Eastern Conference. We're going to move to the Western Conference in the next video. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our videos as we record a video every other week, and we will really enjoy your support. Till later, peace.